It is another episode of the Juice on the Cuse podcast. Wes Cheng alongside Jim Stechschulte. Thanks so much for joining us on this Monday, December 3rd, 2024. We've got so much to talk about as always, and we begin today's show with Syracuse basketball. Jim, for the first time since 1968, Syracuse will enter Christmas with a losing record. You wrote a column that got quite a bit of buzz on social media. What's the crux of that article for listeners who haven't read it yet?
The shorthand is it's too soon to be judge, jury, and apparently executioner on Adrian Autry as the head coach of this program. He said the basic. Well, I did dollop it in the column some. The basically boils down to is he's told us what he wants to do. In the introductory press conference, he said that he wanted to play man. So that was obviously going to be a drastic change. And he's mentioned a couple times this season already how he wants this team to play positionless basketball, which requires a further overhaul of this roster. There are guys who are returning, a couple guys who left through the portal last year who were not going to fit that ideal. And you could see how he's kind of shifted that as far as some of the players he's brought in. While they're not in all cases perfect fits for that, you can see with the freshmen how like a player like Donnie Freeman, who is a skilled, kind of a skilled big man who can play inside and out, as evidenced by that 4-for-4 shooting day from beyond the arc he had a couple weeks ago. You can see that's kind of like the platonic ideal of what he's looking for. Someone who can guard multiple positions, someone who can play inside and out, pass, cut, the whole package.
Yeah, so you pointed this out in your story, and you also mentioned it just now. It's a mismatched roster,
yes.
And unfortunately, they had several swings and misses for one-year players in the portal, right? So I think the guy that you and I were probably most excited about, and maybe the more under-heralded transfer, was Jaquan Carlos, and he's a nice player, but we've seen through 11 games he just lacks the size and athleticism to really get by power four players, and he's been kind of exposed. Now he's settled into a nice niche, but his ceiling is pretty limited. And you also wrote in the article about Jair Davis and Lucas Taylor. Again, both very nice players, and they've turned into effort guys, but Davis undersized at the four, Lucas Taylor a shooting guard who can't really shoot. So again, it's kind of misfires in the recruiting portal, and you can have a couple, but when you take this in an amalgamation and then you throw in Eddie Lampkin, who you also mentioned is not an explosive player underneath the basket, those are four guys who they wanted at least one of them or two of them to hit at a power four level. That hasn't happened. And you just hope that next year when they bring in more of those positionless basketball players that you mentioned, that there's a little bit more consistency.
Yeah, it hasn't worked out as they hoped. I do think that Autry was hoping that the addition of these guys would be good enough to help keep this team competitive. I think Lampkin, of course, from what he's shown us, he's a bit of a liability in the defensive end. His strengths there are playing with his body positioning and using his size to work as a defensive rebounder. But he's, we talked before how he's not much protection at the rim. And as you mentioned, Davis being an undersized power forward more than anything else. And even getting back to Carlos, where he's just shown to be limited. I think the thought was that he'd be able to handle the ball well enough and set up guys, and that the fact that he was a two-time all colonial defensive player at Hofstra made you think that he was going to be good enough to make it work. And it just hasn't translated to this level. Even when you look at the guys that Syracuse was rumored to have a good shot at in the transfer portal last year, they still had the same 1 year remaining of eligibility. Talking about Dakota Lefew, who was from Mount St. Mary's and ended up at Georgia, and even Jeremy Roach, who the former Duke player who ended up at Baylor. These two guys both got kicked around as guys that Syracuse at least had interest in, and Lefew was close enough where I think I still have some notes that for potential piece on how he would fit with the programs on my computer. But these are both guys. Those are also both guys who are in their last year of eligibility. So it kind of underscores that whole fact that there's going to be a changing at the guard as far as shifting this entire roster over to get rid of guys who are recruited to play a different offensive style and a 2-3 zone, and replacing them with guys who fit this ideal of what Autry wants from his roster.
So, Jim, I wanted to play a little hypo with you here. Let's just say that next year's team doesn't work out either, and they're, again, with another losing record. How much time would you give Adrian Autry for his coaching tenure at Syracuse?
And just to clarify, you're talking about having a losing record this year and then also next year, or
That's
just
right. That's right.
I think if it's 2 losing years in a row, I think you have to consider moving on, because he looks like then that he's not going to be the answer. I mean, it's almost a tear down to the studs, what he's trying to do with the program as far as switching the identity on both ends of the floor. But if you but under 500 for 2 years in a row, you can see how that is reason to move on, because it clearly looks like he's not the guy. I think the only way where he could skate and stay on after next year, if it's 2 consecutive losing seasons, is if there's some sort of extenuating circumstances next year, whether it's a number of injuries. I'm not just talking about like what's happened to Starling this year. I don't really know how much his absence has really affected this team. I mean, you could say maybe
I think in some ways it's actually better that he got hurt. I hate to say it like that, but in terms of the long-term chemistry, because Elijah Moore is now playing more minutes. And if you're looking to the future and he's one of those positionless basketball players you're talking about, and he fits more of the vision of what Autry wants, him getting more playing time in the season actually probably works out for the long haul, assuming he doesn't hit the portal. And I don't mean to wish ill will on JJ Starling. That's certainly not what I meant. But I think just in terms of the long-term trajectory, it does help that he isn't playing at the moment. Yeah.
You and I have texted after Starling's injury that how this should kind of be a shift towards the future as far as like the promotion. We both believe the promotion of Moore into the starting lineup is a plus, focusing more on giving Moore and Freeman as many minutes that they can handle, or to help speed up their growth as quickly as possible. But the other thing that I think would be required in a second losing season, if there were to be such a thing, was that the team would have to be showing improvement and ramping up towards the end of the year. Like if next season they finish the regular season 14-17, but they win, let's say 5 or 6 out of their last 8 games to get to that record, and they win an ACC tournament game and maybe even 2, depending on how things work out in this theoretical thing, you could say that there's enough positive momentum that I think, especially in this scenario where we imagine that next year's team is going to be driven by guys who will be sophomores and freshmen next year. I think that's the way you could say Autry is clearly building something, and giving him one more season, I think, is absolutely fair at that juncture.
Yeah, I guess that's where you and I disagree. I think when you have a Sadiq White and you have a Kyan Anthony, and you hopefully get Donnie Freeman back for another year with Elijah Moore, if those 4 guys can't get you to the NCAA tournament, I don't know who's going to be able to. And I think at that point, regardless of whether they make the tournament or by a little bit, or whether they miss the tournament by a little bit or whether they miss it by a lot, I think that Autry probably has to be relieved at that point. I think just because, again, there is a Syracuse standard, and if you give him these 4 guys who are supposed to be pretty elite and you can't get them to the NCAA tournament, I think at that point you have to make a change regardless of whether they go 14-17 or whether they go 5-25.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I mean, the only other factor is whatever is coming up on the recruiting, horizon for the following year's class, and whether and I mean, how many of those guys on the roster next year would be interested in departing the program if Autry is fired. It's one of those parts about the player empowerment area that we talk about with the portal and the NIL that we don't talk about as much. But I think especially in a sport like basketball with a smaller roster, it does have to be something that has to be considered, because if Autry is a popular coach with those 6-7 guys, if you want to include Mastorovich in the 7 guys in those 2 classes, by the time next year is winding down, it may actually be better for the program to keep him, even if the record's not up to snuff.
So we're going to take a quick break. Andrew Kouwe will join us when we return. This is the Juice on the Cuse podcast. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds from everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, NHL to UFC, head over to BetOnline today, and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Back on the Juice on the Cuse podcast, Wes Cheng here with you, and we are joined by our great friend, 2003 national champion, and the Juice Online senior college basketball analyst, Andrew Kouwe. Andrew, what's going on?
Good afternoon. How are you, Wes?
Andrew, really good. I want to get you started on this one. It's been, it's been a historically bad season for Syracuse. Jim Boeheim, in his 47 years as head coach, never had a losing record through 11 games. What have you seen going wrong on the court, and is there any chance of saving this team?
Well, there's always a chance of saving this team. I think, as we know, as sports fans, we know even when it feels like it's at its worst, it can always get worse, but it can always get better. And I think that's the nature a lot of times with college basketball as well, is with all these new players, not just freshmen but transfers. It's difficult sometimes to kind of get that chemistry going, get that understanding of where players want to be, and how players just interact with each other in terms of on court and obviously a little bit off court. So it takes time. Sometimes, I mean, it can click right away. That doesn't happen very often. I think the more things that happen is the difficulty of kind of just finding that rhythm. And then when you lose an injury or you lose a starter, especially a key returner that kind of can drive the offense, that's going to lead to a lot of struggle. So I do think it gets better. I remember watching the team last year, and when they, for their Thanksgiving tournament, it was a difficult tournament, but then you saw the team continue to get better, continue to play hard, and step by step, you saw better offense, better defense, and I have faith in the coaching staff and in Coach Autry in terms of just again not giving up, not just kind of closing your ears, put the earmuffs on. I know it's wintertime, so and just kind of focus on playing basketball. I think one thing with the Christmas break is nice is that you're really just there all the students are gone. You have really nothing to do. The weather's terrible, so you sit in your dorm playing video games, and you go to practice, and then you go lift or work out. Like it's just hoops and just hanging out as a team. So sometimes these Christmas breaks can feel long and tired, but it's a good way of kind of refocusing and getting back on the right track.
So, Andrew, I look back at your career at Syracuse. You obviously remember that special 2003 team, but the 2002 team had all sorts of chemistry issues. If this is a chemistry issue like it was in 2002, what are some of the ways that Syracuse can kind of improve that chemistry heading into ACC play?
With our chemistry back in 2002, the year that we got off to a great start, I remember actually, I was just having a conversation not too long ago with one of my roommates and Hakeem Warwick. And I remember I saw an old clip on like Twitter, Instagram of that year. And we were like a top 12 team in the country, like midway through the season. And we end up making the NIT. And we're talking like, how crazy is that to think that we're, a top 15 team and we ended up being in the NIT. And the chemistry issue for us that year was off court. Just certain players that there was just a lot of things going on behind the scenes off the court that was the main problem, and that kind of obviously can feed into on the court, especially when things start going the wrong way in terms of wins and losses. The chemistry can really be a problem off the court. So I don't know about this team, right? We don't know yet when it comes to off the court if there's any issues. I think the on court, if it's just an on court thing and playing together, then that can be fixed. Again, it's really going to all happen really through practice and just kind of just grinding it out. It's a grind when it's on the court, and they'll get it figured out. They'll get the players correctly in terms of minutes played, and I think that's the biggest thing. When I look at this team and watching them play, I think we know, like when we all see Donnie Freeman, and we see that athleticism and that talent, and obviously there's been frustration with throughout this year with you see him play 30 minutes one game and then 10 minutes another, and he even talked about himself, the pressure of being that kind of big time recruit. But we know the talent is there. He's a 20 and 10 guy. Someone like Elijah Moore, who's, gets some games he's playing a lot, other games he's not playing as much. But when he's out there, one thing I love about him is that he doesn't have fear. He's a freshman with no fear. You saw
I
them
like
one.
that edge. He's got that. He's kind of got that Malachi Richardson, Eric Devendorf edge to him, I think.
100%. And you saw when we played Tennessee, in Tennessee, like he nothing bothers him. So, but both of those guys are freshmen. They're gonna have their struggles. They're gonna have their mental frustrations in terms of playing time or getting yelled at. Like they don't get yelled at probably in high school when you're that talented. So it's a learning experience. And to me, as obviously the struggles of this season. I think the more we can play those two guys heavy minutes and really get them even more comfortable with college basketball and more comfortable with the ups and downs, and then you start having more ups than you do downs, that will lead into next year, because next year, those two guys, you know you're going to think are going to be the two that really kind of lead the start of next year with the great recruiting class we have coming in. So to me, I think the more we can get those two really just playing a lot of minutes, I think those two will help out Chris Bell, because Donnie and Elijah can create their own shot, get their own scoring. I think Chris needs someone to kind of draw the defense, to give him a little extra space to get in that 3-point shooting rhythm. So I think if we can kind of get those two more minutes and deal with the struggles that you're going to get out of freshmen, I think it gives us a better chance, throughout the year, later in the year, and going into next year.
So, Andrew, if you read social media, you know there's a decent portion of the fan base that doesn't want Adrian Autry as head coach anymore. In your opinion, you've been around college basketball a long time. How long do you think a college coach should get with a program before real decisions need to be made about his tenure?
I mean, I think to me, it's like crazy to even think about that, or that's like in my mind, it's like a crazy question, right? To be in terms of, I mean, I know it's being talked on social media and stuff like that, but first, he was a first year coach last year. You saw the team improvement from the start of the year. It's not really his players, technically, obviously he recruited some players, but at the end, the ultimate decision, in terms of the players last year were a lot of them, from Coach Boeheim, and he's his second year. Like, it's okay to give time and development. He has a great recruiting class coming in next year. That's a big part of coaching as well, not just on court and basketball wise. You got to bring in good players. You're seeing obviously, Donnie Freeman coming in this year, a great class coming next year. So, I know we're very reactionary, and that's how sports are. But if you think of Syracuse basketball, you think of the players that have grown into Syracuse basketball. Like, it's always been about giving time. If you look at from the Lawrence Motons to the Hakeem Works to the John Wallaces, we've always been known to, you know, kind of develop those players to turn into great players and legends in Syracuse. So, we're obviously in a different time frame with basketball, with college basketball, in terms you don't have that ability to do any more, as much anymore. But I have a lot of faith in Coach Autry. I think, next year, I think as these freshmen recruiting class, if we can keep Donnie Freeman, if we can keep certain players to come back next year, we're going to obviously, as a fan base, you're going to want to kind of see improvement, and see that natural maturation progression of the team. But to have that talk now, I think, is a little bit short-sighted.
Andrew, I want to get you out of here on this one. You keep mentioning the great recruiting class that's coming in. One of them is your former teammate Carmelo Anthony's son, Kyan. How strange is it for you to see your teammate's son now being the potential savior of Syracuse basketball?
Yes, it makes me feel very old. So thanks again for the
We're the same
reminder.
age, Andrew. We're the same age.
So it's pretty cool. Obviously, I've had people talk to me about it. Once he made the announcement, or even before, like, you think he'll go there? I'm like, man, that seems to me. It's like, man, talk about the pressure. It seems so tough. That's shoes that you. How can you fill those shoes of Carmelo Anthony, as someone who just came in there and brought Syracuse? Was that missing piece to bring Syracuse their first national championship? But at the same time, I think it's also awesome. He seems to, looking at interviews and see him, he seems to just have a love for the game, and I'm sure he understands probably the pressure or the talk that will be when he gets on campus. But if he can go out and just enjoy the game, enjoy what hoops is all about, I think it's great that he's also coming in with some well-known recruits as well. So maybe lowers the burden of maybe the fan base thinking, oh, this is going to be Carmelo. He's gonna, they're coming in as a kind of a well-known class. And I think that maybe makes it even a easier transition for him. But I think it'll be exciting. I think the fan base has to be excited to see that type of a recruiting class that's deciding early and coming to Syracuse, and then you kind of put on top of that, if we can keep Donnie Freeman, if we can keep Elijah, if Chris comes back for one more year, I think that that's what you need is you need that you talk about chemistry. You need guys to kind of stay around a year or two, and if that means there's a struggle like it is this year, okay. But I think when you look at it, I think the team's going to improve. I think Donnie's only going to improve. Elijah's only going to improve, and maybe that doesn't get us to a tournament and what we all want for this year, but we always have to look forward.
Andrew, thanks for taking a couple of minutes with us. Former Syracuse guard and 2003 national champion, the Juice Online senior college basketball analyst, Andrew Kouwe. Andrew, always a pleasure. We'll catch up with you soon.
Wes, have a wonderful holiday.
Back here on the Juice on the Cuse podcast, Wes Cheng here with Jim Stechschulte. Jim, let's wrap the show up. You got a closing thought for us?
I do actually, Wes. We're recording this on Monday. Yesterday was a Sunday, and of course, what many people do, a little NFL football on Sunday. But it was kind of a little bit of background noise. I was, looking at my phone, reading something online, and then all of a sudden, I heard a commercial talking about a big bowl matchup with Kyle McCord and Syracuse. That's right. I was watching Fox, but they promoted the Holiday Bowl featuring Syracuse and Washington State, and my ears certainly pricked up. And it was very nice to hear, and certainly a reason why you could see that SU would be happy to jump at an opportunity for Holiday Bowl on that national over-the-air broadcast on Fox. A great chance for the program to get promoted as well, playing in that game.
Yeah, it's nice that Kyle McCord's getting a lot of attention, as he should be, being the NCAA football's Division I top passer in terms of yards. And let's see what happens with that waiver. A source telling the Juice Online that Syracuse has, in fact, applied for a waiver, and they expect to hear back by the end of the year as to whether Kyle McCord's going to get that extra year of eligibility, going back to when he had his red shirt burned by OSU in his freshman year. So we'll see how that plays out, but maybe there may be more Kyle McCord in Syracuse's feature. And Jim, wanted to close the show on football as well. So a little bit of recruiting news as Fran Brown Jr. will be joining the Syracuse football program. And yes, that's right. The son of head coach Fran Brown played at St. Francis in Pennsylvania his first 2 years, and in his redshirt freshman season this fall, he had 33 tackles for the Red Flash. He joined Syracuse with 3 years of eligibility remaining. Now, it's a nice story, right? He's not necessarily going to be, coming in an NFL draft pick, but a nice story. I always enjoy seeing these father-son combos in college, and let's just hope we get to see him on the field a few times in the next 3 years.
Yeah, it'd be nice, especially because that would mean it would actually be turned into a quality player. Coach Brown does not seem like the type who's just going to put a guy out there just for a good feeling.
Well, let's hope that's right. Anyway, that's it for us. For Jim Stechschulte, this is Wes Cheng. You've been listening to the Juice on the Cuse podcast presented by Believe in Rivals, and we will see you next time.